This is Myra Elaine on the Behind Space Channel. I'm reading from the four Gospels, the first four books in the New Testament in the Bible. I'm in chapter 8, starting in verse 40, and I'm going to stop on verse 48. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by crowds. A woman came in the crowd and suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately the bleeding stopped. "Who touches me?" Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, "Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you." Then Jesus said, "Someone deliberately touched me, for I felt a healing power go out from me." When the woman realized she could no longer stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." This woman lived in Jewish society, and I don't know if it's commonly known that in the old Jewish law, by modern Christians, in the old Jewish law, if a woman was bleeding, that she was considered unclean. And she was ostracized. There were many things that could make someone unclean. Like if you had touched a dead body, there were rules about how you could cleanse yourself and not be unclean. But women had to wait through their entire period in somewhat of more isolation. They weren't allowed maybe to go to festivals, or they were when anybody was considered unclean for any reason. And this woman, and you wouldn't be able to marry, nobody would want to marry you, because if a man is with a woman that's bleeding, he's considered unclean, and he has to go through rituals. So I would say it was fairly common that Jewish men and women didn't have relations during the bleeding. And so what man would marry a woman that was continuously bleeding? Who would want to have anything to do with her, because she was constantly in a state of oppression because of her bleeding? I can't imagine all that this woman went through. And people think, well, today you go to the OBGYN and you get a D&C if you are continuously bleeding. And there are things available to us now that they did not have then. And she could not have known how to cure this. Her family could not have known how to cure this. But it was a big social detriment to her. And just the touch of Jesus, just the touch of his cloak, and the healing power went into her and stopped the bleeding. And as soon as she goes through the rituals of being cleansed, she can be part of society again. A lot of times, people don't hear about what happened with the person mentioned in the first part of this chapter. I mean, not chapter, but this passage, this section. A man named Jairus, a leader of a local synagogue, came to Jesus for a favor. And what happens with his daughter is miraculous beyond belief. And we don't hear about Janice's daughter in Sunday school, because in between Jairus coming to see Jesus and what Jesus does with Jairus' daughter is this woman who's bleeding. It's not exactly Sunday school material, the discussion that needs to happen. This is a good passage for a women's group to talk about in their Sunday school, if they're a separate group from the men, which I don't really agree with doing that, but that's just my opinion. But a group of women, whether in Sunday school or a book club or just another knitting group or whatever, where there's a group of women, this is a good passage to share, because we don't a lot of times realize what women went through in the past. Next week, I'll be reading about Jairus' daughter and that enormous miracle. Have a wonderful and blessed day.